Welcome to another episode of His Will for Your Life podcast. I'm your host, Sherry LaVon Harris, and I have joining me tonight is Erskine A. Alexander, who will speak on the subject grief, depression, and suicidal thoughts. Stay tuned.
His Will for Your Life with Sherry Harris. This is your weekly Wednesday 7 p.m. podcast. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11. Informative, hot topics, testimonies, interviews, along with your weekly guests and more. And now here's your host, Sherry Harris.
Welcome back. So we know that this podcast is about grief, depression, and suicidal thoughts. And as the holiday approaches, we know that this is not a wonderful time of year for many of us. And so we have our guest tonight to speak on that subject. How are you, Erskine?
Hi, Miss Sherry. How you doing?
I am well. Thank you for accepting the invitation to be on our podcast tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So I'm going to give you this opportunity to share with our audience who you are and what you do.
Well, okay. How you doing, everyone? My name is Erskine Alexander. I'm a mental health clinician based out here in New York City. I am also a licensed social worker for the state of Connecticut. And I've been in service and in practice for over 20 years. Been employed at the hospital, at Montefiore Hospital, the Department of Psychiatry. This year made 20 years, also working with 2 mental health clinicians in private practice for the city of New York. That's been 11 years. And just recently, like I said, I was credentialed for the state of Connecticut to work in private practice as well. So it's definitely been an interesting ride. Oh, I forgot to throw in that I'm also a social worker for at-risk youth at Sobro Community Services in the Bronx, New York, and New York City here as well. So I wear a lot of hats. Another hat that I wear, I'm also an actor. With television credits including For Life, that was on ABC. That was executive produced by Curtis 50 Cent Jackson. I was also featured in the movie starring role in the movie Me Familia 2 that was released in June, directed by Mr. Joe Cinemera. And I'm also in a project now called Housewarming Husbands.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, so we're in production with that right now. So it's been great. It's been a fun ride. And of course, with mental health, it's definitely been a ride here in New York. I think everybody's familiar with what we went through, not just New York, but just the world in general.
Right.
What we experienced in 2020, and just a lot of the highlight being on New York, because we were really, really, really impacted by the effects of COVID, and naturally just across the board with mental health, the challenges that our children went through, parents, couples, even the dog had a problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's just some of my accolades right there. So again, Sherry, thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest on your amazing platform.
You are so welcome. But before we dive in and talk about grief, depression, and suicidal thoughts, I'm going to show just a reel real quickly for our viewing audience, and we'll be right back.
Thank you. What you want to know, you big crack?
I'd like you to share with the group.
I killed a cop. And the truth is, I'll do it again.
Styles, we meet again.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What happened?
They ambushed us. Came out and took out snakes. They killed my whole crew. You even look like one of the guys. I don't know. We just all got ambushed, man. See, we took Joe Pollinari's jet all the way over here to Italy, and we didn't come for no footballs either.
Well, I hope you did your research, because you just broke into.
We know what house we broke into. I guess you didn't when you killed my boy Snake.
I'm sorry I had to edit your your video, but you guys can catch that on Amazon Prime. Me Familia 2.
Yeah.
It's a good movie. I'm still watching it though, but it's really good. So please support him and watch that movie. Okay, we're back.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes.
Jerry. So, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to just ask you a couple of questions. So we're just going to dive right in, unless you want to share something else.
Oh, no. That's fine.
Okay. All righty. What should we do as individuals when we see our family and friends, dealing with life, right? How do we help them?
First of all, giving them the platform to be able to express how they feel, and also giving them the platform to make them feel like they're not being judged. In the African American community, of course, we're the least race to go to therapy. We have made improvement. There has been an increase, but we're still unfortunately at the bottom of the barrel. And it could be for various reasons. A lot of the reasons is that, if I go see a psychiatrist, if I go see a therapist, that's considered crazy. And that's not what the case is. Those are some of the things that, as mental health clinicians, African American mental health clinicians, those are the things that we've had to battle with over the years. Of people not wanting to go to therapy because they don't want to have the stereotype of quote unquote being crazy. So just like everybody, we're human. We deal with life. We deal with challenges. We have to have that person to talk to. And if you feel like you can't get that support from your family or your friends or whoever, go see an outside individual. Go see a credentialed licensed professional so they can sit down with you and help you get through those challenges, because the one thing about a mental health clinician is we do not judge. We do not judge. And I want to be very clear speaking to the audience tonight about that. When you go see a therapist, you are not being judged. A lot of times people are so resistant to going to therapy because they're like, well, if I say this, if I tell them this, they're going to look at me funny. And that's not the case. That's not the case. I'm glad that there's been an increase in people going to see mental health clinicians and seeking out the necessary services that they need to help themselves get through whatever challenging times that they're dealing with. So it's been an increase, which is great. But and of course with COVID, it's been extremely first of all, Sherry, I want to say this. There's not a person, and this includes myself.
Right.
There's not a person after 2020, whether it's our children, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, cousins, grandmamas, nieces, nephews, whoever. There's not a single person on this planet that didn't experience some form of anxiety.
Yes.
With what was going on in the world in 2020.
Right.
The reason why I say that is because as African Americans, when we have problems or we have challenges, what do we normally do? We go to church.
I was about to say, yep.
We go to church. Well, guess what happened? They closed the churches. They closed the churches. So the outlet that we all went to as African Americans, or just people in general, I'm not going to just say African Americans, but just people in general, they closed it up.
Yes.
So what outlet do you have? What person do you have? What individual or groups or what support do you have to be able to talk about the challenges and to talk about the problems that you have? And that's where the mental health clinicians, I think we went in high demand.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever came up with the invention of teletherapy, they should get a Nobel Peace Prize.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's so effective that way too.
very
I
effective.
had to do telehealth with some of my clients, and you can do well. Most of them were children, so you can do interact with them with games, any way to get them the services that they needed. Um, Virtually, it was awesome. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
uh, and then they felt more comfortable because they were in their own setting,
right,
and they didn't
right.
feel violated or overwhelmed by someone else in their home or in their space.
Right. And it has its advantages. It has its
Mhm.
advantages. I'll talk about the disadvantage in a second, but the advantages, like you said, you're in the comfort of your home.
Mhm.
You can kick your feet up.
Mhm.
You can speak the way you want to speak and just feel comfortable.
Right.
I think I traded in I didn't trade them in, but my bow ties and shirt and ties and suits.
Mhm.
Well, for the whole year of
Right.
2020, we resulted in hoodies. You know,
It's absolutely.
I think my wife, she thinks I'm nuts because I got a closet full of hoodies that's just
Mhm.
loaded. So
Mhm.
it was good in that sense. It still is good in that sense. Especially
Mhm.
working with the state of Connecticut, because a lot of the clients that do reside in Connecticut, they stay in surrounding areas, and a lot of times people don't want to deal with the traffic, and they don't want
Absolutely.
to deal with oh, I got to get off from work.
Right.
I got to dash to therapy. I got to go home, take care of my kids. I got to make sure my kids
Right.
are all.
Right.
I don't have the time to do
Mhm.
that. But guess
Right.
what? If I get home, get me something to eat, get in front of the computer, I can
Mhm.
pour out my feelings. I can
Mhm.
express how I feel, and I can
Right.
talk about what I want to talk about in the comfort of my home.
Mhm.
So it's definitely been an advantage. It's definitely been it's been phenomenal with people being able to talk and being able to express how they feel, because we reached a point this year. Well, within the last, we're still in it. Let's just,
Mhm.
for the
Mhm.
record, we're still in it, but uh, people are feeling more comfortable with going to therapy. My schedule is through the roof. For our viewers that's watching, at all of my positions, I'm the only African American married father out of all three teens.
Mhm. Mm.
And so of course, I've heard Taraji Henson talk about it on her podcast.
Yes.
Um, just being comfortable with talking with an African American clinician, and let
Mhm.
alone a male clinician. Not
Mhm.
saying that other races are not just as good, because they're just as good as well. But
Mhm.
with our community and with our
Right.
people, we've always been slow to go to therapy. So when we do finally get that courage up to go to therapy and research this, we want to make sure we can talk to somebody we know.
Absolutely.
I need you to know what I know, and understand what I understand. You might not have the same problem, but you can at
Right.
least relate on some scale.
Right.
And so that's been the beauty, and it's definitely been a blessing as well.
Okay. What would you say that would be some of the signs that we can recognize for those that are around us, loved ones and friends who are dealing with or battling depression?
Well, the change in activities, the things that they normally do, they don't want to do it anymore. The
Mhm.
quiet, crying, lack of energy, no interest, no motivation, no drive, no determination. And some people on the outside will say, oh, that person's being lazy. No, that's not the case that's not the case all the time. Sometimes a person is going through something where it's an extreme challenge where they just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to deal with it. So you notice a change in the behavior. You
Okay.
notice a change in them wanting to be around, the basic things that they would normally do, they don't want to do it anymore. They don't want to be around family. They don't want to be around friends. They don't want to be around the people that they're closely associated with.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things that you pay very, very close attention to when you're dealing with depression.
Okay. And would you say those are the same signs that will be recognized if those who have suicidal thoughts, and does depression lead to that stage?
It can. It
Okay.
can. It definitely can. Definitely all of the signs by far, and just the will to not to want to do it anymore. Some people, and of course, with what we experienced in 2020, the suicide rate went up, the depression rate went up, the anxiety rate went up,
Mm-hmm.
an increase in domestic violence went up, an increase in alcohol use went up.
Mm-hmm.
So all those factors play a major part in you going to the next unfortunate stage of suicide.
Okay.
And nobody wants to see that happen. So that's why it's so important and very imperative that you focus on getting the necessary help that you need so it doesn't go to that point. It's the hardest thing in the world when you watch things on TV,
Mm-hmm.
the things that we all saw on TV.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to turn around and say, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. Why would I even want to be in a world like that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I could get into politics and all that kind of stuff, which I'm not going to go in that direction, but
Mm-hmm.
but it's understandable why people feel the way they feel or why they're doing the things that they're doing, because at the end of the day, for the most part, it's a situation where no one has an outlet to go to, no one has a space that they feel like they can go to,
Right. Right.
and that can go towards suicidal thoughts,
Okay.
and an increase in suicide.
Okay. Let's talk about grief for a moment.
Sure.
Especially around the holidays, and of
Mm.
course during a global pandemic. But many feel that grief always relates to death, right? So, can you tell us the different stages of grief?
Well, different theorists have certain how can I explain? They have different stages of it and how they look at it. There are certain stages that people go through with it. It just really, in a sense, I think depends on the individual.
Uh-huh.
So I unfortunately I didn't list those actual stages. However, it really falls back on the individual. It depends on how they look at the situation, the relationship that they had possibly with the individual who passed away, and what took place. Because you have some people that deal with grief because they feel like they didn't do enough for the
Mm,
family member,
mhm.
or they deal with grief feeling like they did all they could, but they didn't have the support from other family members. So it's really a laundry list
Mhm.
of ways you can look at it, but it's a matter of you getting through each stage or each step and
Okay.
your thought process and how you dealt with it, how you deal
Okay.
with it when you're dealing with the when you're dealing with grief.
Okay. So, in terms of depression, going back, because I think they kind of like all intertwine with one another. Um, do you feel that depression is a form of mental illness, or can
Yes,
it
it
be
is.
considered mental illness?
It can be. It can be. And that's why it's so important to kind of catch it. Unfortunately, nowadays with what's going on in the world, people can compare depression to like cancer.
Mm,
You can treat it, but it can come back.
mm,
And you have to really get a grip on it. You have to really make sure you have the proper supports in place because it can come back. Also, triggers. You have to
mhm,
look at triggers. Some people around the holidays, they're triggered by
mhm,
depression. Just to give an example for myself, my grandmother, she passed away the Saturday before Thanksgiving, and this
mm,
was this was 9 years ago.
mhm,
Well, in my mind, of course, you're going to miss the person. You think about the person and everything how they impacted your life and what they
mhm,
meant to you.
mhm,
However, I was able to understand that. Listen, my grandmother wouldn't see my child graduate from high school because she'd be 100 and some years old, right?
mhm,
And I'm fine with that, but for the individual that feels like they didn't do enough for the family member, or they didn't do
mhm,
certain things for the family member, or not being around a family member, when that time of the year rolls around, with it being a holiday, that's the quickest way in the world to feel like you're going, that's the quickest way in the world to experience depression.
Right. And so, since you talked about trigger, that was one of my questions. What can trigger a grief reaction?
What can trigger a grief? You said a grief reaction?
Mm-hmm.
The holidays. The holidays. I would definitely say the holidays. The holidays, or anything, or being around something that brings back memories of the experience that you had with that person.
Okay. We have a question from one of our viewers. Can a person be depressed and not know it?
Yes, that's very true, Miss Melissa. Yes, they can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do children experience depression?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Would they signs be the same as an adult?
Similar, but not quite the same. The difference with kids is that they're not able to verbally express it the way adults would be able to do it. So a lot of times kids would possibly, if they're in therapy, they would do it through art. You could draw sad faces, or they would make paintings of sad faces, or they would play video games and not be motivated to play the video games when they would normally want to play the video games. Poetry, they make up poems and it's always sad poems, in the classroom settings, not understanding the work. And especially, just to give you an example, like my daughter, throughout 2020, being a teenager, going into being a teenager now, not being able to spend time with your friends, not being able to utilize your social skills. And we all were 13 before. The most exciting thing was to go outside. Well, every kid in America couldn't do that. You know what I mean? Like that went out the window. So the social skills, not being able to play on the basketball team, not being able to be on the football team, not being able to be in the band, that alone, and not being able to even look forward to going to school to look at the girls.
Right.
Just being out, the things that would normally boost your self-esteem, the things that would normally, pump you up, that was, in a sense, that was all put on pause, and especially, not that the rest of the world wasn't affected, but here in New York, where, people like to be out and about, they couldn't do that. So yes, the kids can experience. It's just the difference between the kids and adults is the way they're able to express it.
Right. And I know for, children who do not have any siblings, that it was kind of magnified.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
So they didn't have anyone in the house, they couldn't go out. And it's just a tough situation. And some still suffer for it because we're still in this pandemic.
Yeah. It's and you try not to swerve in the lane of politics, but unfortunately it is. Even with, I have no problem being an open book and just sharing my experience and sharing my story and how it impacted our household. My daughter, we have a 13-year-old, and naturally, she couldn't spend time with her friends. So that was the whole year. So we had to come up with creative things that they could possibly do. Like on a Friday night. So the one thing that she was able to do was she was able to get a laptop and she would have movie night with her friends.
Nice, creative.
We had to be creative, and me and my wife, we in here scratching our head, define an adventure. We have to figure out something, But she would have a movie night with her friends. They would all log on and be able to do movies, play games, that kind of thing. As we got a better understanding of COVID and we were kind of safe to go outside, she would have social distance play dates.
Wow.
So she would go to the park with a friend and they would talk. They would probably play like volleyball, because at that time they were trying out for the volleyball team and trying to get situated with that. We didn't know how it was going to turn out, but they did make it. That's another story, but they did make it. But yes, so she would have a social distance play date.
Wow, that's nice.
Think of ideas of what you would like to do. So she came up with different ideas. We helped her. There were still days where it was still rough. You
Mm-hmm.
know, whereas when it was time to want to like see your friends face to face, she
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do it. So there were rough days, and it was definitely triggered for us as a family around the holidays when you're normally out. We in New York,
Mm-hmm.
we stay in the suburbs of New York, but in New York City, of course, the different
Right.
activities that you do around the holiday, all that was just
Right.
tripped. So we all felt it.
Wow.
We all felt it. Even as husband and wife, I have a wife. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm so used to having a busy schedule with the filming as well as doing my job as a mental health clinician.
Right.
My schedule was through the roof. I'm running
Wow.
through the airports. I'm yes, you know what I mean? And for it to come to a screeching halt, that
Mm-hmm.
was almost like a shock to
Wow.
us. And there were days where I got frustrated because I would see friends kind of bending the ropes and traveling anyway,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, but the presentation here in New York was you can't go nowhere. Oh, you
Right.
you can go somewhere, but if you test positive, these are the consequences. If you're filming and you got to be on set and we have protocol to be on set, if you go off set and you test positive or you travel and you test positive, that's a problem when you come back.
Wow.
You
Did
won't
you
be.
have to constantly test?
Oh God, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
For the TV show For Life, that was on ABC and Hulu. Oh, we got tested every day. We
Wow.
got tested every day, and of course, I did Me Familia too. And what made it so funny with Me Familia too? Of course, you guys can't see it in the reel, but the boomsticks for me
Mm-hmm.
to talk was probably like 6 feet long.
Wow. Wow.
So you got the camera guy like way over there,
Really?
and you got the boomstick over your head. So as I'm running,
Wow.
you guys can't see it, but the guy has the boomstick, and it's just like he's going like this.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's the funniest thing in the world, and as they're going behind me in the clip, like I said, they had to keep everything spaced out. That place where we filmed, they were very strict about
Okay.
the mask. They would no games. They was like, nah, you got to wear the mask. You got
Wow.
to keep the mask on. The only time I was allowed to take the mask off was when I was speaking. Um,
Okay.
it wasn't as bad when we filmed outside.
Mm-hmm.
We wasn't, but of course you had to, do the social distancing and stuff like that.
Right.
And of course, like I said, with the COVID testing, I had to get tested before I went on set. I had to get tested at one point while on set, and then had to get
Wow.
tested when I left.
Wow.
you know,
Wow.
so my nostrils by 2020 had done had it.
I can imagine. I think I feared the test more than I feared COVID.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah.
and it wasn't as bad. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably it was probably the most uncomfortable 2 seconds of your life. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Because nobody's comfortable with anything going up their nose.
Right. Yeah.
But you get used to it, and of course, it just became part of the job, and
Mm-hmm.
and now they try. I work for the I'm in the city of New York,
Mm-hmm.
and they implemented a mandate that you have to get vaccinated. Before they made it mandate, they said, well, listen, you would get tested every week.
Wow.
And you had to get tested, and of course they had to come back positive. But now they changed it. They switched it, and you probably seen it on the news. You have to be vaccinated, and if you're not vaccinated, you're gonna you would no longer be able to be employed at most agencies here in New York City. So yeah.
So that is added stress to those who already dealing with the
Oh wow.
pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're out of work.
Mm-hmm.
They get back to work, still have to play catch up because there was a season when you weren't working, right?
Yes.
So now you have this added thing. If you don't take it,
Yeah.
right, you lose your job.
Yeah.
So that's stress in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any of those clients where they didn't want to take it, or they're dealing with stress to the 10th power?
Oh, I had it with clients and colleagues. I
Mm.
had colleagues of over 20 years that decided to no longer work at our place of employment because they did not want to get the vaccination. And that was an uproar in itself before they implemented the strategy. For the sports fans out there, even the situation with Kyrie Irving, that plays for the Brooklyn Nets, he refused to get vaccinated, and the Brooklyn Nets let him go. They said, listen, we respect your decision, but when New York passed the law that you have to be vaccinated to enter into restaurants and social clubs and certain places, that was a game changer. The area in New York that I live in, I'm in the suburbs, so I'm about 50 minutes north, so it's not as bad in this area. But the minute you go into New York City, it's definitely, you're mandated. And there were some people that felt like they needed more research on the vaccination. They needed a better understanding as to why, and no one wants to feel forced to do anything. And
I think that's the issue. Yeah.
That was the underlying issue. So of course that generated anxiety, that generated anger, and that generated depression, so there was an increase in violence, unfortunately, on the subways. Even at my office, at the hospital, there was a protest going on. Wow. Out there, because you got people who have been employed at their place of employment for 25 years, and you're telling me I have to do this, and if I don't do this, I'm going to lose my job. So that was a huge uproar, and it still is. It still is,
Do you feel that this is why a lot of therapists are going into private practice?
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah. I mean, not even just going into private practice; they're just in high demand, whether they're in private practice or working at a facility.
Right. Which do you feel is best, telehealth or in person, or do you think that it will ever go back to being fully in person, or do you prefer telehealth?
Okay, it has its advantages and it has its disadvantages. Of course, it's nothing like being at home in a hoodie and being able to talk freely and kick your feet up and not have to drive 45 minutes up the highway when you leave the office at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. However, it is extremely hard when you have a 7-year-old that you're trying to get to stay focused on the camera, or an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old. And you have some kids, they'll be talking to you, and if they in the comfort of their home and they got the video games right there, they got their toys right there, that can be a challenge.
Yeah.
For the adults, I find difficult, whereas if there's a strained relationship between a husband and wife, it's the hardest thing in the world to talk about your husband and what he's doing or what he's not doing, or talk about your wife and what she's doing or not doing, and she's in the other room.
Right. Right. That's true.
So, I've had, patients, sit in their cars, sit in the laundry room, I had one guy that was in the woods one time, and I'm more nervous for him. I'm like, bruh, is a bear gonna come out there and get you or something like that? So it has its advantages, it has its disadvantages. Me personally, of course, and it's, I would say, by an inch, and it definitely depends on the particular case. Like I said, being at home, you can never top being at home. You can enjoy being at home. However, with some relationships, between the therapist and the patient, you just get a better understanding and a better viewing when you're face to face. And that's just, it kind of gives you a quicker way to get the picture. Not that you can't do it through the camera, but your chances of getting a better understanding of what the problem is and being able to really, really get that body language and understand what the person is really, really going through just through visual, you never go wrong face to face.
So in the past 2 weeks, I've had about, I see 8 to 10 individuals who are believers. Not all of them, but the majority of them, who just don't know if they can take it anymore.
Yeah.
They don't know if they're going to make it. They're trying to hold on, whether it's for their children or for their family, but it's a struggle. What do you say to that individual who may be listening or listen to the replay that is going through a tough time right now?
What do I say to that person is treat yourself. Well, I'm going to take 2 steps back.
Mm-hmm.
When you say believers, you're saying as far as like believing in God and going to church.
Believer in God and go to church, and then there's some who do not um, know God.
Right, right. I'm going to say this definitely, and this is probably going to be an extended answer. And I just want to make sure I cover all angles in how I present this.
Mm-hmm.
As I stated earlier, African Americans, when we have problems, we go to church. We go to church and, we thank God for the blessings, in which we should, right? I would definitely, for those that believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
For those that don't believe in God, you have every right to your high power and what you utilize for support.
Mm-hmm.
But whether you believe in God or whether you believe in, or you have your own personal beliefs and who you believe in, you have to think about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by thinking about yourself, you have to think about yourself mentally and what makes you happy and what you need to do to be at peace and be at comfort.
Mm-hmm.
You have to treat yourself. I've always said, despite what's going on in the world, because whether you're a believer or you're a non-believer, we all experienced,
Mm-hmm.
the challenges that went on in the world with COVID and the vaccine and just certain things that took place racial wise, that was traumatic for us.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've always said to those individuals is keep good energy around you.
Mm-hmm.
Find you an activity or a hobby that you can do. Reinvent yourself. Reinvent yourself. And I have no problem being an open book just to share some of the things that I did. Uh, Naturally, I believe in God, but I wasn't able to go to church.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't able to go to church, and because of what was going on, somebody catch the spirit. I don't know if I should catch them. They might have COVID, So, so when that kind of thing took place, and we were all at home, research always says exercise, move the body. You move the body, you move the mind. So I got into that. Now I was going to the gym before COVID, but my friend who I trained with, we made a pact and a bond. So I said, we said, we're going to keep this going throughout. We're going to continue to exercise. We're going to keep a regular routine, just like we was doing before COVID. And we did. We got into eating healthy because once we started to get more information on COVID and how it was impacting us as African Americans, because we're the ones that's affected with the high blood pressure, the diabetes, the high cholesterol. So when COVID came in, it was a high percentage of us that was affected, So I'm not saying that other races weren't, it's just that we were the higher population that was affected. So I got into exercising. I increased my exercising, I should say. My wife, we got into certain eating habits where they were more healthier, and just thinking about the positive things. You know what I mean? And it was hard. It was hard because you're altering your whole thought process. You know what I mean? Social media could be a trigger. So we had to kind of, not that we wasn't on social media, but we had to kind of fall back because looking at people traveling and looking at certain parts of the world where people were traveling, but then we couldn't travel. They tell us no, you know what I mean? And that got a little complicated. So what happened was we kept kind of giving ourselves go, when the world opened up, man, we're going to be right. I'm going to go to the beach and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. So one of the things that I always recommend to people is always reward yourself, treat yourself, give yourself something to look forward to, despite what kind of week you have, despite what you have going on. Treat yourself, and that could be getting your nails done, getting your feet done, going to the movies, buying a nice outfit. I'm not saying go out and act like act like you're Jay-Z and buying out a mall or nothing like that, but I'm just saying reward yourself. Treat yourself, you know what I mean? And that was something that we all had to kind of find ways to do. We had to be creative even in our home. And we had, my wife and I and my daughter, we all had a thing that we do on Friday nights. We call it Chipotle Fridays. So we would order Chipotle. If our daughter was having a date night, not a date night, but a movie night with her friends in her house, we would have ours in the other side of the house.
Mhm.
She could have her time with her friends, and we could have our time with us. So uh, that's what got us through 2020. That
Mhm.
was something that I emphasized to a lot of my clients. To give themselves something to look forward to. Uh,
All right. You mentioned the movies, you mentioned nails done, and that's our go to for women. But during the pandemic, during a time where it's still not really safe
yeah,
to be that close
yeah,
of getting your nails done or even going to sit in a movie theater, what are some other choices that can be done? Because, this is the holiday season, and
yeah,
as we stated, it's not. Merry for everyone.
yeah.
This is not a happy time of
Right.
year for many. And so, how would you reach that individual at this point?
I,
And
I mean, it's kind of hard because people have their own thought process about the vaccination situation. In my honest opinion, I think we have to. This is where we have to do. We have to rely on our faith, but we have to do it safely. Um, Nothing wrong with being around your family members, but be around those that are being safe. That's the most important thing.
absolutely.
Um, People, for us, for my family, we are vaccinated, and of
Mhm.
course, here in New York, that hit a little different versus other states. So, you don't, I've had conversations with certain friends in certain states, and they wasn't buying it. you
Mhm.
know Not that I wouldn't be around that friend or be around those family members in those states or whatever, but it's just a matter of just really, really being safe. So I do think you should go on and live your life. I do think that, but you have to just take the necessary uh, steps to make sure you're safe. With the holidays coming up, even if it's just with your immediate family and you're not comfortable being around a crowd of people, do some fun things within your household. If you're not comfortable with going to the movies, maybe you can schedule a date to go to the park, or maybe schedule a chance to go out, or go out in the morning. Go out in the morning if you have to. You just have to find alternate ways uh, to be creative with spending your time, or utilizing your time, but mostly being safe. Safe. My wife, for example, she is like, I'm not going. When we were really, really going through the thick of it with COVID, she was like, I'm not going to no restaurant, period. No, it ain't no discussion. It ain't no debate. Her feet was planted in cement. She was like, no, no, and no. So in 2020, naturally, we were all in the house. Everybody was in the house, right?
Mhm.
2021 rolls around, and my birthday, it's a particular restaurant that most of my family and friends know that I love to frequent whenever I get the chance. I didn't go to it a lot in 2020 because it was closed, right? So for my birthday, my wife was like, okay, we'll go to that restaurant, but
Mhm.
we're gonna get there at brunch. We're gonna get there at 11:30, 12 o'clock at the daytime before it gets to jump.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
she made that compromise for me. So we go to the restaurant. We get there about 11:30, 12. And we had a great time. We
Mhm.
turned up, and it was my birthday, and we had a ball, right? But I guarantee you, as the crowd started to kind of come in, and like, I guess it was like 1:30, 2 o'clock or whatever, my wife was like, check, please, check, check. And we made a beeline to the door. And it was the same thing again. It was the same thing again when we went out to dinner. I think it might have been for my daughter's birthday. We took her to a restaurant, and my wife, she walks in and she's like, I'm not with it, and her, and so, to respect how she feels, even though it was a challenge, we thought, she would cook certain things here. You know what I mean? She would make certain things here. So some of the
Mhm.
things that we would normally eat at those restaurants,
Mhm.
like she reinvented herself and said, listen, I'm going to make that here.
Yes, now that's my type of person.
Yeah, yeah, she
Mhm.
she she was on it. And so you definitely got to be careful because you do have certain family members and certain people in certain states that were really out having a good time.
Mhm.
So, of course, the best thing that I can say, and I want to make sure I'm answering your question correctly, is if you're with your immediate family, just make sure you're as safe as possible. Do things within yourself as a family. Um, the only time me personally here in New York, I've been here. I'm a Georgia native, but I've been in New York for 22 years. And, as far as all the touristy stuff and all that, that doesn't excite me unless somebody from out of town comes up. If somebody from out of town comes up, I'll go out then. But even then, that's once in a blue moon because people are not coming to New York like that. They're coming to New York. They're coming to New York, but it's not like it was pre-COVID.
Well, I'm that friend and that family member. If you've been somewhere, you visit somewhere, no, I'm still that person. I don't go anywhere.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't go anywhere. I work in the school system, so I have to be around people. But when it's time for lunch, I go in my car and I eat my food because I take off my mask in my car. I'm not taking it off in that building for nothing.
Yeah. And the funny thing about that, even with us, as I stated earlier, I work for the hospital, so I go in the hospital twice a week, right? I'm in the office by myself. I might have, I'm on a rotating schedule because they want us to social distance. They don't want us to see any clients at that office. No problem. So 1 week, I go in the office twice a week. 1 week, I may have one colleague in there. The next week, I may not have no colleague in there, So I have this whole space to myself, so I can eat and I can talk and I, do my work and stuff like that, which is great. Is we're actually having a company Christmas party tomorrow, but a lot of people are not going, because they just don't feel comfortable. Now, mind you, everybody that's going to attend this party, you're vaccinated. You're vaccinated, but there's still some people that's like, I ain't with it, and that's fine and that's fine and dandy.
Yes.
I just recently, I ended up getting the booster shot because I was scheduled to travel to Texas to speak to some students down there, and of course, every state is different. Every state is different, and so I just wanted to be safe. But of course, you come back, or if you're around a crowd of people, you go for the COVID testing. So that's kind of where we were. So I wholeheartedly respect how you feel because you're not the only one. My mother-in-law, she's the same way. She ain't with no restaurants. Even now, she ain't with it.
I stopped DoorDash and everything. I was like, nope, because they need their jobs, right? And so they may still go to work because they need to eat too.
Yeah.
And they're touching my stuff or probably digging in the bag and some of my fries. I don't know. But,
and that's the way she
I
feels.
find myself cooking more.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, and like I said, it's just the dynamics of the world and how the information is being presented because you have certain people that have their own definition on what they think it is and they have their protocols on how they think it is, and like I said, that goes back to the anxiety because you got us thinking one way and you got this group of people thinking another way, and then you try to merge the two worlds together, now you clash it. So like I said, my family's in Georgia. And the way they moved was totally different the way we were moving in New York. And so up until we got the vaccination, and it was so funny, and I'm a firm believer that God does things for a reason. I have to share this story. Of course, I got, my wife and I, we got vaccinated back in April, May or whatever. And at the time, they didn't have anything for the kids. So our daughter at that time was 12 and they didn't have anything out yet. So of course, we're vaccinated, but of course my wife got concerns. Listen, we can't go down there and our daughter gets sick or something happens or whatever. Lo and behold, I guess you could say as the conversation was getting thick, because now we both were missing our families. The conversations are getting a little tense.
Mm-hmm.
between both of us because I'm like, listen, I'm not going to Georgia to elbow my mother. I'm not doing that. I'm not about that life. Because I already haven't seen you in a year. I ain't seen her in a face to face in a year and a half.
Right.
So I get it. And then of course with the television stuff that took off, there was certain appearances that I had to, naturally you go to your hometown, people want to speak to you and see you. They wanted you to do certain interviews. So I'm ready. I'm at this point, I'm itching. I'm 20 pounds lighter. I done revamped the whole figure since the last.
Right.
So luckily they came up with the vaccine for 12 and up. And my daughter made that cut. So because at this point she's fed up with not being able to see her friends. Me and my wife, we're kind of fed up with clashing with each other on how this is going to work when we go visit family. And when she got vaccinated, I think they probably could have cut her arm off. She would have been perfectly fine with it. Just stick the thing in and just go.
Wow.
Because she would be able to see her friends. So I get it. It's like I said. And then we go down south, and unfortunately there was certain family members that actually had caught COVID. So it was unfortunate. But it just goes to show you about the level of anxiety of how people people dealt with this whole thing.
I thank you for making it comical. I'm silly as it is, but I think that's what helped me during this pandemic time, coupled with me having a relationship with God.
Yeah.
I found things that wasn't even supposed to be funny, or I made them funny, so that I can get through.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about those who can't find anything that's just going to put them in that happy place.
Well,
right?
You know what?
This is a tough time.
Yeah, and the thing is, I would suggest to them to go out. Well, not go out, but try to think of things that are fun for yourself. You know what I mean? That if you're not comfortable, and these are for the individuals that are not comfortable with going out, because we have to respect how they feel and that thought process behind that as well. But for the ones, do some things, maybe redecorate your house. Just come up with ideas that best suit you. Come out with ideas or strategies that will make you feel comfortable. Try something that you've never done before. Those are the things that I strongly. I emphasize that even to my clients. Do something that you don't normally do. And like you said, be in a space where you can be happy. Watch funny stuff. Watch like anything that can just bring a smile to your face. Because a lot of times, it's the hardest thing in the world around the holidays, where people are triggered. People lost loved ones. So with the people losing their loved ones during COVID, and there's still not a quote unquote solution to it, that right there can bring triggers. That right there can bring anxieties, and that right there brings depression. So to move past that, do something fun. Be around people. Keep good energy around you. If going to church, depending on how the situation is, if that works for you, great. But also keep good energy around you. Give yourself something to look forward to. Go out if you're comfortable with that. But go out, and I have to always say, if you're going to go out and do it safely. That's the most important thing.
So back to grief. So there's an individual who lost a parent a few months ago, but hasn't really had not so much the time, but didn't necessarily grieve. They felt the loss, they shed tears, but don't believe that they really grieved that parent's death. Is that norm? Not is it normal, but do you find many who experience that?
Yeah.
Is there a time frame on it to grieve? I don't think so, but you're
absolutely correct. There's no time frame. You do it at your pace. It's no different than going. I compare it to the gym. If the agreement is for you and I to do 2 miles, right? I might finish in 10 minutes. You might finish in 20,
Mhm.
but you do it at your pace. You
Okay.
know, you know yourself better than anybody else, and
Mhm.
you know what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
Mhm.
You know what makes you feel comfortable. You know what makes you feel sensitive. You do it at your pace.
Okay.
Some people stay busy. You know, they you know they stay busy or whatever. And if that's your way of dealing with it, then that's fine. But
Mhm.
if you want to just lock yourself in a room
Mhm.
or you know, or just be in a space where you just want to cry, that's okay.
Mhm.
That's okay. That
Mhm.
is absolutely okay. Um, you know, for me personally, like I said, nothing. My experience could be totally different than the next person's experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I didn't. I lost a buddy of mine uh, to COVID back in August. You
Mhm.
know, and you know it was definitely a shock because I just talked to the guy and you know
Mhm.
everything was cool. Um, it hurt because we grew up together and me and him went to school together, we went to college together, that kind of thing. um One day I was on the treadmill and the goal was to just do 30 minutes that day. I don't know what it was, but I started thinking about him and I said, I
Mhm.
want to stay on, so I stayed on the treadmill.
Mhm.
I wasn't running anything, but I just I had my headphones on and I was just going. I just wasn't ready to get off the treadmill just
Wow.
yet. you
Wow.
know um and it could have been something I was listening to. It could have been something about, I mean, I don't know what I was listening to in my headphones at that particular moment, but whatever it was, and at that particular moment, I just wanted to just stay on the treadmill for a
Wow.
minute, just to think about that. And then there's other times where, I've lost a friend and I just wanted to cry, 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 and get it out. I lost one good buddy of mine, you know, 13 years ago.
Mhm.
And I just remember, taking a Friday night, and I think, my wife at that time, she was pregnant, so she's sleeping. I had the same laptop, and I'm looking at our pictures, me and the guys'
Mhm.
picture on Facebook, and I just cried. I just wanted to just get it
Wow.
out because that, and I felt better. Naturally, I was, when I flew to Georgia because that's where it went down. Um, naturally at the funeral, I felt a certain type of way, of course, but just to grieve and get past it and to just think about the times that we had together, that was how I dealt with it. So I think each person deals with it the way they chooses to do the way they choose to deal with it, and they do it at their pace. There's no wrong way, no, you should do it this way.
Mhm.
There's no such thing. You do it the way it feels more comfortable for you to do
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I always say that people grieve differently,
it. Yeah.
um, and it doesn't matter the length of time. Um, we always associate grieving with death.
Hmm.
So what about those individuals who's grieving from moving from one state to another, or grieving, from a loss of a job, because it doesn't always mean it's death,
Right.
you
You're right
know.
about
And
that.
so um, it kind of get pushed in a corner, if you will, and
Mhm.
don't take it as seriously because they're grieving over something other than death.
Yeah.
Can you talk to those individuals?
Yeah. The twist, the advantage of moving from one job to another job is the blessing that you can do that, or you'll be in a position to do that.
Mhm.
It hurts because you have memories with
Mhm.
your colleagues,
Mhm.
and also look at it like this. Look at it like this. If you're moving from one state, like let's say you're moving from New York to
Mhm.
Georgia, or New
Mhm.
York to California, something like that.
Mhm.
If it's if you're moving for a reason where it's a promotion, it's a chance of growth, always keep that at the forefront. You know what I mean? Always look at it like this. This is a path for me. This is a growth process. This is a promotion for
Mhm.
me. Yes, you're nervous. Yes, you're going to have anxiety, but this is a good space. One of the hardest things in the world for me was to get on a plane from Georgia at the age of 22 and
Mhm.
have to take on New York City by myself.
Wow.
And at this point, you go from, your aunts in Atlanta and your mama, everybody right there in Atlanta, now you up here, man, you got to do your laundry. You got to do everything. by
Right.
yourself. But, and it was because all my homeboys, close friends, just the comfort of being around all your immediate close friends and the hype and your friends and all that. To leave all of that behind and to say, listen, I want to try something different. That was a challenge, but I also kept in my mind that this was something for me to grow at. I wouldn't be on this platform talking to you if I didn't take that step and come to New York. If I didn't say, God bless me with the opportunity to graduate from an Ivy League school that I could say me and Barack Obama went to together. I didn't go with him at that time, but we went to the same college. And to be a graduate of an Ivy League institution, that's something that I feel like God had set up for me, So sometimes, when you're going to grieve leaving hundreds of family members and friends behind, but at the end of the day, if it's for your growth, whether it's personally or professionally, you always keep that at the forefront. It's for your growth. It's an advantage. It's a winning situation for you. And so that's the thing with jobs or career change or just wanting to do something different with your life. The thing with death is that you're upset and there's a frustration and there's a level of anxiety or depression because the person is not coming back. That's the difference. That same friend that I was saying that passed away, he was rooting for me 100% to go to New York. Hey, go to New York. Yeah, man, representing New York. But the hardest thing was this particular friend worked in the airport, in Atlanta's airport. And every time I would come through the airport, I would see him. I would always go to his games.
Right.
I would always get so when he passed away, whenever the first flight that I took back to Atlanta and landed in Atlanta airport, and it just so happened to land in the terminal where he was at, I felt nauseous. I felt nauseous, and it hurt. It definitely hurt, and so it was a trigger. But so knowing that I won't see him in the airport, that was something that I had to get used to. So that's the difference between the two. When you look at it from that perspective, the challenge is when the person is not going to be here anymore. That's the hardest, I would say. That's the part where, I know when I go to Georgia, I'm not going to see this guy, or I know when I go to this place, I'm not going to see this person, or anybody. When I go to this particular city or go to that city, this person is no longer there.
Right.
So,
And I like the fact that you're sharing that about your friend, because men are men, do not express that type of love and express that type of grief, right? It's like it's just buried. And I think that's what makes it harder to heal in that area, because it's not brought to surface. And so the fact that you're sharing that is an awesome.
Thank you. Because it's so funny. I got to do a similar podcast like this on Saturday to talk to a crowd of men about mental health and how we're not as quick as other individuals to go for mental health. You know what I mean? And for years, we've, like you said, we've always looked at it like, oh no, I don't need to talk to nobody. I'm a man. I'm a warrior. I'm a man. But guess what? We men, we have feelings too.
Absolutely.
And it's okay. And the difference between us is that sometimes we'll hold it in and then we'll blow up. Like it's like, like where did that come from? Because we held it in and we didn't get a chance to talk about it. And the pressures of feeling like you have to be the man of the house, you have to be the father, you have to be the provider. These are things that weigh on our shoulders as well. And so it's okay if we're vulnerable. It's okay if we want to cry, yes, I have no problem saying if you're a friend of mine and you die, I'm going to cry, especially if we were close. There's just no way around it because I have to deal with accepting the fact that I'm never going to see you again.
Mhm.
So
Talk to that. Stay there and talk to that man who may be listening or listen
yeah,
to the replay,
sure.
who has the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
He can't grieve. He can't show emotion because he's supposed to be the strong man.
Mm-hmm.
But there's times where men don't feel strong, and it's okay for them to have their moment.
Yeah, okay. So for that particular gentleman, and I wouldn't say nothing to that man or these men that may be watching that I don't apply
Mhm,
myself.
mhm,
Keep good people around you,
mhm,
keep good energy around you, and it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset, but you keep people around you, whether it's your spouse, your mama, your cousin, whoever, keep people around you that's going to keep you uplifted. We
mhm,
don't have to carry the world on our shoulders by ourselves. That's the purpose of having a good spouse. That's the purpose of having good friends. That's the
mhm,
purpose. And it doesn't make you less than a man,
mhm,
because I don't care what career you're in, what profession you're in, at the end of the day, we all have to survive.
mhm,
If you're not in a good space mentally, it can impact your kids. It can impact how you interact with your spouse. It can
mhm,
impact how you interact with your colleagues. Keep good, keep yourself in a good environment, keep yourself in a good space, and keep good energy around you, most importantly.
mhm.
Yes.
It says she love a man that can show their emotions through their tears.
Yeah, yeah. Because let me tell you, Melissa, and I hope I said your name correctly. Um, that has always been a problem with us men, that we felt like we couldn't speak, or we have to be this mandingo warrior. And at the end of the day, no, it's okay to cry. It doesn't make you less than a man if you cry. So men, as we come out of that, we have to understand the importance of being able to express ourselves, and we feel better.
Mhm,
We feel better. Let it out. I'm not trying to be graphic when I say this, but we all have eaten something that the body said, listen, you got to let this go.
mhm,
And when you let that go, you feel better. Your stomach feels better.
mhm,
The same thing applies mentally.
mhm. And therapy, letting men know it's okay to go to therapy. It
Yeah,
doesn't make them weak. It doesn't make them less than.
right, right. I'm working with a lot of men now, and I'm extremely excited about it.
Mhm,
Extremely excited about it, because working with working with our men who just need someone to talk to says a lot.
mhm,
What we saw in 2020 from the George, how do you help? I'm going to answer that question too. Um, what we saw in 2020 with the George Floyd incident,
mhm,
if that didn't make you want to have a conversation in itself, what will
mhm,
as a black man? What
mhm,
we saw on January the 6th,
mhm,
if that
mhm,
doesn't make you want to have a
mhm,
conversation as a black man. And it's not even that you're providing quote unquote therapy. I'm just sitting down talking to another brother that understands and experienced the same thing that I
mhm,
experienced.
mhm,
Um, I wanted to go back to the question that came up before. It was a question about how do you get a teen to go to therapy who refuses to go to therapy? How do you help teens who refuse to get counseling? You know, it's a matter of them letting that Miss Cynthia, letting them know that they can have someone to talk to.
mhm,
Because just like any teen, just like anybody, oh, I don't need to talk to nobody. I'm strong and I'm this and this and this and that. But just like the average teen that likes sports or they like hip hop, everybody had a coach.
mhm,
Someone was there to point Jay-Z if he's the big time rapper. Someone said, Jay, you need to do it this way. LeBron, phenomenal athlete. LeBron, you need to do it. That everybody needed a coach. And no one's saying that you're going to go to therapy forever. A therapist's job is just to help you line up the blocks that you already have and make sure you utilize those blocks as comfortable as you can for yourself. That's what therapy is all about. And that's what the teens have to understand. If you can be whatever it is you want to be, and you can lay it out. But let us guide you. Let a mental health clinician guide you. So when you do feel like you want to give up, or you feel like you want to quit, or you're overwhelmed with your schoolwork, let us come up with stages so we can continue to come up with, not stages, but steps to help you get and reach your goal that you're trying to reach.
Right. I guess, I talked to somebody earlier earlier this week who said God can't heal what we won't reveal, right?
Right.
So these individuals need help. I feel what she's saying is, how do you help a teen who refuse to get counseling? So they're not going to come and sit down and get counseling.
Mhm.
How do you help them? So are there ways like, I use disguised learning with children who don't want to learn?
Okay.
So how do you perhaps use some disguise techniques that will help an individual who needs counseling but won't get counseling?
Okay.
You can do
You
it in
know,
a way where they're less offended.
the one thing that I will always say, if you could just think in that direction, what you talk about with that person, it stays between you and that person.
Mhm.
It stays between you and the person. And I tell a parent in a minute, I'll tell a parent in a minute, what I talk about with your child stays between us. I don't tell the parent what we talk about. And let the child know that, Miss Cynthia, if you could do that, she still won't go. She's really hurting for a 16-year-old friend who was killed. Yeah, she needs to talk to someone, and that's painful. I get what she's going through, but let it be known to her that she can go to someone and that you will not be involved in the therapy sessions. So, Miss Cynthia, if you hear me, let your daughter, or I don't know if it's your daughter or your granddaughter, let her know that she can talk to someone and you would not be involved in the conversation. You would not be asking what was talked about. She will be in a space where she can talk about how she feels about her friend. A lot of times kids will say, I ain't going to therapy because they're going to go back and tell my business, or they think they're going to, my business going to be out there in the street and I ain't going to tell, they're thinking that it's going to get back to the parent, and that's not what it's about. I say this as a clinician, the only time a parent is notified is if the kid is going to do something to harm themselves or they're going to harm someone.
That's what
Right.
I tell them. Yeah.
Yeah, Miss Cynthia, you have to reiterate to her, and maybe she'll do it when she's ready. I don't, you don't want to come across like you're constantly, pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, but you can always let it be known that if she does decide to go to therapy, you have nothing to do with that. You have nothing to do with it. I understand that because I counsel also. Yeah, that's the only way that's going to work. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Mhm.
You know,
That's true. Sometimes you can't force them. They have to be willing and ready, because even if they do go, they're going for you and they're not going to receive anything that's being said.
exactly.
So they have to see a need where they want it. I guess at this point would be for us to stand in the gap for them and pray and cover them in prayer,
Right.
that they don't internalize that grief so badly that um, they're consumed with depression and it ends up in a different, you know,
Right.
a
Right.
different situation. So,
Right.
yeah, so we'll be praying for your granddaughter and any other individual who is overwhelmed with grief,
Right.
because that is happening. Usually, when someone is grieving, I ask God to overwhelm them with His peace,
Right.
because they are overwhelmed by the trauma,
Yeah.
and we talked about the triggers.
Yeah.
Um, you're
Yeah.
welcome. Yeah. So, I guess that's it for my questions. If there's anything else that you want to share and say that is related to the topic or not, you may do so at this time.
Sure, sure. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much, Sherry, for
You're welcome.
allowing me to be a guest on your podcast. I would love to do this again because it's needed.
Yes.
Um, and we are in high demand. Mental health clinicians,
Mhm.
pastors, we're in high
Yes.
demand.
Yes.
High. When I say
Yes.
high demand, high demand.
Yes. I
So
feel myself at work just stepping into that mental health professional mode, even
mhm,
while I'm teaching, and then the fact that the discernment that I have in the classroom of children that are dealing with certain issues, it's like, how do you juggle all of it? And
yeah,
it's by the grace of God that I do, but children are experiencing so much.
yes, they are.
Well, I'm not going to say it on here, but yeah, so students are dealing with a lot,
It's a
and
lot.
there's a lot of weight on them that they should not be experiencing at their age, especially in elementary school.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it gets even more interesting as they get to junior high because I have a daughter. My daughter's in junior high school, and believe you me, too many have lost family and friends, and this is their first holiday. Oh yeah, yes, Miss Cynthia. And the one thing, I said this on a radio station down in Georgia. When those time, depending on how comfortable people are with coming together, celebrate the life, the legacy of the family member that they lost. Some people throw parties. I know in the Hispanic community it's jumping. They throw parties, and of course, quote unquote, you have to be safe, granted. But if that's your way as a family, uh, if that's your way of mourning, if that's your way of dealing with the grief of losing the lost one, go for it. It's all about celebrating the legacy and the history of the person. And these holidays and for the rest, for life, going forward, it's going to always be a trigger, especially for those who have lost family members to COVID. I saw her question. I saw something flash up, and I just wanted to make sure I commented on what she said.
She said COVID caused a lot of grief for families.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Yes, it did. And like I said, being here in New York, and I wouldn't say nothing on this podcast that I don't apply myself. One of the things that I always emphasize the importance of is being thankful for life. Being thankful for the people that surround you, and keeping good people, keeping good energy around you. Most importantly,
Yeah, that's important.
You gotta keep it.
Nothing. I don't let anything disturb my peace. My peace is more than money.
Yeah, you're right. And the funny thing about it, I've experienced, and it's unfortunate, where certain friends and even family members have made a decision to say, I'm not going to communicate because your energy is so vibrant. And I just don't want to be in that space. And I say, okay. Because
if you tell me 1 + 1 = 5, you absolutely right.
I'll let you have it. It's 5.
It's 5.
It's 5. Yeah. And I'm perfectly fine with that because, from myself to my wife, to my daughter, to my parents, her parents, we always emphasize the importance of just being thankful for life. You're supposed to always keep good energy around you. And what I always say, and I say this to you too, Miss Sherry, is reward yourself and treat yourself. Do whatever it is to celebrate your success in whatever it is that you're doing. Some, like I said, some people go get their hair and their nails done every week. Well, that's your thing. That's your thing. I went to the barber this morning. I said, I'm gonna be on the podcast tonight. Call my man up. I got to be right. I don't know who's gonna be on this thing,
Right.
But it's little do you know it does wonders for your self-esteem. It does wonders for your confidence. So keep that energy close. And for the people that don't want to be around it, they don't feel comfortable being around it, it's okay. It's okay.
And just being around people, you don't even have to say anything. It's just that, like you said, it's that energy, that presence that they bring, that makes you comfortable. It makes you peace. I can be around somebody and I'm at peace. Anytime I'm uncomfortable around you, I don't want to be around you because I don't like to be uncomfortable, whether you're family or not. If I have to be on guard when I'm around you, I choose not to be around you because I like peace.
And that's okay.
I'm an introvert and I enjoy my own company. And it took me, I want to say maybe I was about 21, 22 when I realized I enjoy my own company. So I did not have to be around people to feel satisfied. I enjoy me. I like me. Right.
Yeah.
And as I got older, the more I liked me. So it doesn't matter if I'm around anyone or not, but it does help just to have somebody there, even if they're not saying a word.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah. So we have to pray for our young people who are experiencing grief, and depression. I think my son is. He doesn't say that to me. I did put him into therapy. And I think he grieves some things, and maybe he doesn't know how to articulate them. But I see signs of grieving for loss. Right. Right. Not necessarily death, but loss.
Loss, yeah.
Mhm.
And like I said, if he's lost anything, um, it can easily be triggered
Mhm.
around the holidays.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, for some people, like I stated earlier, the holidays, we both have stated, the
Mhm.
holidays bring out the worst, and it brings out the feelings. It brings
Mhm.
out that sense of knowing that
Mhm.
it's going to be different, or it's bringing back the sense of knowing that this happened
Mhm.
and around this time or whatever.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's
Like
so
that biological clock, that inner clock.
yeah.
This is the time this happens, and I'm trying to pay close attention to what is actually going on.
Mhm.
But I feel that that's one of the issues, that's a trigger for him,
Yeah.
around certain times.
Yeah.
And it can be smells. It can be something that I don't even know about because it may not have happened when he was with me.
Right.
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 So those are things we have to pay attention to, so that we don't lose our children,
Right.
especially during this pandemic.
And give them the platform to sit and talk.
Mhm.
Give them the platform to sit and
If
talk.
they will talk, yeah, we
Yeah.
have powwow conversations, and I can't pray if you're not talking. I
Right.
can't help you if you don't share. And it's, I don't know,
Right.
but we do know, or he may not know how to articulate it. So
Right.
to express themselves. So yeah, so we have to pray for our children. Thank you so much for joining
Absolutely.
us tonight.
Thank
Uh,
you.
before we go, so to give you a few minutes to maybe think of something, that you may want to close out and say, but I'm just going to play this video, because I think it's fitting for right now, and it's just a 2-minute video. Okay, and
Okay.
it also give you a break to get something to drink, and we'll come right back.
Sure.
All right. Whew. So I had a moment.
Okay.
My son is here listening to this podcast, and it must have been Holy Spirit that led me to go to this break. And my shirt was probably wet because he just boo-hooed, and he just boo-hooed crying, and he's still crying. Right, he's right. Well, you can't see him, but he's right by me, and he's overwhelmed.
Yeah. And
He's overwhelmed, and children have feelings, and
yes, they do.
um, he just said he just felt like crying, and I told him all the
And it's
time,
okay.
you cry, it's a
It's
purging,
okay.
you can cry. And so, whew, so that
It's
was a
okay.
moment.
Mhm.
So while we were gone, we have a question. What do you say to parents who child commits suicide, and how do you help them at this time?
Wow. Wow, it's not a hard question. You keep them encouraged, unfortunately, despite the situation. Have them go to grief support groups. Definitely go to groups. I actually wrote down some stuff here about suicide. Um, Most importantly, maybe going to groups, going to therapy, grief groups. That's
Mhm,
the best way to get past something like that, because that's hard.
mhm,
Um, what you can also do is definitely make sure, uh, it's the hardest thing in the world when you have a child that terminates their own life, granted. But the best way to really, really get through that is understanding that you're not the only parent that deals with that. And that's why it's so important to maybe go to grief groups, go to groups for therapy, surround yourself with other families who have experienced those kind of things. Individual therapy will work fine, but to go to grief groups would be extremely helpful, so you can be around other families who have experienced the same thing.
mhm.
I think that's very, it's I think that will probably be the most effective way to deal with a family whose child committed suicide.
Wow. You know, what can we do? I know this is another podcast, but
Yeah, we're gonna have to do this again. I
we
already see we're gonna be doing a series with this Miss Sherry.
we are, because so many kids are doing that. They're going to school as if they're going to school, um, and they're getting on a bus, but they're taking their lives. They've just had enough. You
Mhm.
know, I constantly check on my son. I know he gets tired of me watching him other than me having to watch him period anyway, but just making sure that he's okay as well, because our children don't talk to us, right? They don't speak to us. That's one of the reasons why I did get him a counselor, and I don't even bother um, to listen in on their conversation, because I want him to feel that he
Yes.
gets to speak in peace. It's someone that I don't know, he didn't know, so she can't come back and tell me stuff, and we're sharing things like that. So that's not going to happen. But I want him to feel like he has an outlet.
Right. And if he's listening, he's close to you and he's listening. I want to piggyback on the answer that I told Miss Cynthia.
Uh-huh.
Feel free to sit down and talk to anyone. Talk to your therapist. Talk to your therapist. The therapist, and I say this to all the teenagers out there that's watching, the therapist keeps everything strictly confidential.
Yes, they do.
They do not go back and tell mommy nothing. They do not go back and tell daddy nothing. If you go in and say your girlfriend did this, or you like girls, or you like cats, or you like whatever, everything stays strictly confidential. The reason why it stays strictly confidential is because we cannot correct or make an attempt to resolve the problem if you have concerns about the information being leaked out, what we talk about,
or if we're the trigger,
and if the parent is the trigger. So for every teenager that's watching, for every parent who has a teenager, and that goes for me too. Because as parents, we're going to respond a certain type of way to our children, and I get it. We get it. But a therapist is going to respond differently and allow them to express themselves and make sure that how they express themselves, they're doing it in a manner where it's comfortable for them to get past the problem. So teenagers, if you're out there listening, parents that are teenagers, including me, if your child wants to go to therapy, let it be known that everything is strictly confidential with the therapist.
Okay, so it's a good thing this is ending. Oh, actually, we went over.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be on another podcast, another session interview at 9:00.
Like
8:45. So you got about 15 minutes. Thank you so much. I'm quite sure we'll have to do this again.
Yes.
Get in between your acting times, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. This was truly an honor, and it was truly a blessing. And just the energy of people being more aware of mental health awareness, period. It's exciting and it's great. It's needed. Most importantly. And like I said, hopefully if this world can get right, we can do some things face to face,
Yes.
Because you're in Virginia, correct?
Virginia, but okay. I'm hoping to do a live show where there's a live audience, as well, even if the guest has to be virtual, but still a live show. So I'm looking forward to doing that within the next year, because our anniversary is January 6th, so we'll be a year old next month.
That's awesome.
So
That's awesome.
1 year of doing this podcast.
I have to put on a suit and come to Virginia. What part? What part are you in?
I'm in Chesapeake.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in Chesapeake.
You want to come down there and get right.
Yes, they're saying thank you. You are appreciated. So,
thank you. My pleasure. Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for staying tuned. Please like, tag, and share this video. Next week we will have Dr. Marsha Jones. She's dynamic. She's gonna teach on the topic God's vision for our future. So please join us next week, December 17th. And have a good night, you all. God bless. Thank you again, Erskine. Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
God bless.
Please join Cherie and her special guest again next week for another riveting and informative segment of His Will for Your Life podcast.